Bolivia is boiling. The South American country is facing its worst unrest in decades as protests over fuel shortages, rising prices and economic reforms intensify. Once a major South American natural gas producer, Bolivia is now facing one of the most severe crises in its 200-year history, with the economy hit hard by a lack of investment in the oil and gas sector and the fallout from political decisions. Bolivia's President Rodrigo Paz says that he will reshuffle his cabinet to pacify protesters, but will it be enough? Aman Kumar Himanshu reports.
The streets of Bolivia's capital, La Paz, resembled a battleground. Protesters blocked roads, set off dynamite, and riot police fired tear gas. As Bolivia sinks deeper into its worst political crisis in decades, the unrest escalated sharply over the past 2 weeks. At least 4 deaths were reported, including 3 people who were unable to reach a hospital for urgent medical treatment because of the roadblocks. The disruptions emptied out food markets, interrupted fuel distribution, and caused shortages of essential medical supplies, including oxygen for hospitals. More than 3,000 security personnel were deployed to clear the roads. But the protest movement continues to grow. Argentina sent a military aircraft with food supplies at Bolivia's request. Protesters demanded that President Rodrigo Paz's government roll back austerity measures and address rising living costs, with some even calling for his resignation. The protests centered on rising economic pressures. Teachers demanded higher pay and more funding, while transport unions launched open-ended strikes amid fuel shortages and supply concerns. Indigenous and rural groups opposed agrarian reforms, which they said favor large landowners. Paz Pereira, the son of former President J.P. Zamora, who governed from 1989 to 1993, took office, promising an economic shock therapy, but conditions have not improved and some of his measures have proved deeply unpopular. One of his biggest moves was ending Bolivia's 20-year fuel subsidy program. He argued that a free market would improve fuel supply and quality. But instead of relief, the country was hit by continuing shortages and a scandal involving adulterated junk fuel that transport workers said damaged thousands of vehicles. Protesters accused the government of pushing neoliberal policies that favored big businesses and foreign interests, while ordinary Bolivians struggled with rising living costs. The crisis triggered a wave of protests led by powerful labor unions demanding higher wages, reliable fuel supplies, and President Paz's resignation. For a government already reduced to a minority in the country's parliament, the unrest revived political momentum behind former President Evo Morales and his supporters. Amid weeks of resignation demands, Bolivia's President Paz on Thursday said that he will reorganize his cabinet.
And from the government, I want to announce that we are not only going to carry out a reshuffle of the cabinet, because we have to reshuffle a cabinet that has to have a capacity to listen. The president cannot be everywhere. We are forming the Economic and Social Council, where we are going to call on all those who want to participate in the government to build a joint government.
But why everyone is so angry at the president? For nearly 2 decades, Bolivia was governed by the left-wing Movement Towards Socialism party that expanded political power for indigenous communities, rural farmers, and working-class groups through broad social programs. But economic decline and growing divisions inside the party led many voters to seek change. In last year's election, Rodrigo Paz campaigned as a moderate alternative, promising stability and reform. Since taking office, however, Paz has disappointed many of the same voters who helped elect him. His government was criticized for favouring conservative business interests after he filled key cabinet positions with business leaders while leaving indigenous labour and farming sectors largely excluded from power. Tensions peaked on Monday when supporters of former President Evo Morales clashed with police in La Paz while joining broader demonstrations demanding Paz's resignation. Morales still commands enormous influence despite facing an arrest warrant over allegations of human trafficking and statutory rape. The government accuses Morales of fomenting the unrest to evade trial, while Morales maintains that the protests are a necessary response to a system that views indigenous people and workers as savages. Morales served as Bolivia's first indigenous president from 2006 to 2019. He fundamentally reshaped the country by sharply reducing poverty before a disputed bid for a fourth term that forced him into temporary exile. US Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau claimed that the protests were an ongoing coup d'etat. The US threw its support behind Paz, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirming Washington, D.C.'s backing for Bolivia's constitutional order. The crisis is now spilling beyond Bolivia's borders and exposing divisions across South America. Tensions with Colombia escalated after Colombian President Gustavo Petro described the unrest as a popular insurrection against political and economic elites. Bolivia responded by expelling Colombia's ambassador and deepening the regional diplomatic rift. With Aman Kumar Himanshu, Tanvi Taneja for DD India.